Hey guys, welcome back. And for those of you just joining, my name is Annie and I'm a college student at the George Washington University. I'm a senior, and this is the third installment in my crash course on DBT skills for students, both for social situations and also for navigating some of the emotions that come up being a student today. I'm joined here today by Finley, who's a little rascal of a terrier, so I'm going to try to stay mindful and not let him derail me while I'm trying to teach, but if there's any barking in the background, that would be why. So, if you guys watched last week's video, you'll know that we were working on interpersonal effectiveness, which is one of the 4 modules in DBT, being mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, emotion regulation, and distress tolerance. The structure of these videos is that at the beginning we do a mindfulness skill, or I'll teach you a mindfulness skill to practice later, and then we move into the skill of the day. So today the skill is going to be the second main interpersonal effectiveness skill. If we remember, there are 3 big interpersonal effectiveness skills based on objective. So the first is for getting what you want, and that was the Dear Man skill, which is in the last video. And the second skill is making and keeping friends, which is what we're going to work on today. But first, we're going to run through a quick mindfulness exercise. Okay, so today's mindfulness is going to be the what skill. So I'm going to sort of give you guys an assignment to try using this skill in class if you're feeling distracted or overwhelmed or for some reason having trouble paying attention. So the first thing you do with the what skill is just observe. And this is really focusing on kind of surface level, like what's around you, how are you feeling, what's your body sensation. You can think about how the room temperature feels. You can think about how your notebook feels if you're holding it, or the pen feels in your hand. Listen to the voices without thinking about what's being said necessarily. It's really just to kind of get you focusing on the things around you and less distracted with what's going on in your head. So the second thing to do is describe. So this is where you start to put words to the things you've observed. So you might have noticed body sensations of maybe you're flushed, you're kind of warm, you're a little shaky. So in the describe section, you would think, well, what could those sensations be telling me? Maybe I'm anxious, and so anxiety would be something you're describing in that situation. I think this is also the place where it's helpful to start describing what's going on around you. So even if it sounds simple, just, what class am I in? What are we talking about? Who's talking? And then sort of just thinking about those things and putting words to the experience. And then the final step is to participate. So when I'm in class and I'm distracted for any sort of reason, maybe I'm tired or overwhelmed or thinking about something else, and I've already run through these first 2, the easiest thing for me to do with participating is to either ask or answer a question. And it can be something little that seems obvious that you already know the answer to, but the point is just to really get yourself engaged with what's going on and try to be mindful, at least for a little bit, about what's happening. The other thing with mindfulness is that it's not a state you can live in forever, so you can time yourself, or you can set an objective of, I want to be in mindfulness state with these skills for, 2 questions or till the end of class. But there's no expectation that you're always going to be able to be in mindfulness. So that's the mindfulness skill I would recommend trying if you're having trouble paying attention in class. And that's, again, the what skill. So moving on to our interpersonal effectiveness unit. As I said, we are on the second objective for interpersonal effectiveness, which is making and keeping friends. For this skill, I actually really want to focus on the making friends aspect. I know a lot of times at school you're in different events, or at the beginning of school where you have to meet a lot of new people and you have to, try to make friends with them. And that can be really overwhelming and stressful. So we're going to focus on sort of how to make friends in a social situation where you might be feeling kind of uncomfortable, or overwhelmed, specifically like a meet and greet at your school. So the skill that we use for that is called the GIVE skill. Now, the GIVE skill stands for gentle, interested, validated, and easy manner. So to run through this skill, I'm again going to use an example, which is, say you're at a student mixer and you start talking to someone who you think really might be a good friend down the line, but you find out they have different political views than you. So this is taking it up a level because I think that most likely the difficulty with making friends is difference of opinion, it's the social signaling, there are a lot of factors. So I think this way it might be most applicable to people. Okay, so first I'm going to give you a breakdown of what each of the letters in the acronym stand for and what they mean, and then we'll do a run through in more of a real life situation that I described, and we're also going to take a second after we run through these skills to talk about social signaling, which isn't included so much in traditional DBT, but is a big part of a newer DBT called RODBT. So we'll just run through that really quick as well, because I think that's really important. So the G in the GIVE skill for making friends stands for gentle. So that means when you're talking to someone, no attacks. Use kind of polite language or rather neutral language if you disagree with someone, especially in a situation of trying to make friends or making friends in a large group of people. It might not be the time for you to take important stances on things. It might be better just to be really like giving and validating and not attack the other person, even if you think they're wrong. So the other skill is no threats. Now this might sound kind of obvious. In traditional DBT, it's kind of used to avoid manipulation. But in real life, I think that we often have a lot of implicit threats that we might not realize that alienate people. So if you're talking to someone and you don't agree with them, sometimes we'll give off the tone or signal or with our words imply, if you don't agree with me, we're not going to be friends. Or if I think you're wrong, I don't want to talk to you. And even if that's not overtly said, it can be expressed a lot in body language. So it's just something to be cautious about, that if you're telling yourself those ultimatums, like this person voted for so-and-so, so I just can't be their friend, chances are that's coming across in your body language, and that's going to alienate the person pretty quickly. And also in these larger situations, you might just be trying to make acquaintances or at least present yourself as a friendly person. So you don't have to worry about, way down the line in the friendship, if you never establish that, if it's going to be an issue or not, because, again, it's just the initial contact. So it's best to sort of reserve those kind of ultimatums and threats, even if they're not explicit. So the next skill in that is no judgments, which is similar. It's don't moralize things people are saying. Avoid should statements when you're talking yourself, like everyone should know that it's important to recycle. That might be something you really believe in, and it might be totally correct. However, you don't really know where the other person lands on some of those things, so making it more about yourself and judging others is going to be key. So instead of everyone should recycle, if you want to talk about that, you could say something like, I personally find recycling really important, and I like to make sure I'm recycling as effectively as possible because that's something I'm passionate about. And that way you're not implying the other person's a bad person or not friend-worthy for not doing that, but you're also letting them know what your values are, so people can sort of self-select that way. And then there's no sneering. And I think the big in social interactions where this comes out most is sort of in the, don't be X. So comments like, don't be dumb, or don't be silly, don't be ridiculous. That's kind of considered sneering. And again, you might be right. The other person might be being dumb and silly and ridiculous. But that's not really going to help you make friends, and it might not be that relevant, especially if you're just meeting acquaintances or trying to hang out with some people who you don't plan on being best friends with, but you would like to have a nice working relationship with. So the I in GIVE stands for well, ACT, interested. The acronyms aren't always perfect. So we're going to talk about this more once we run through all of the letters in terms of how to act interested from a body language point of view. But in terms of actually acting interested in kind of what you say, some tricks I like to use are to like repeat things back to people so that they know you're listening, and it also gives a sense of camaraderie. So if on the flip side you were listening to someone who was saying, I think recycling is really important, I'm really passionate about it, I really enjoy doing it, you might, even if you don't agree, respond with something like, oh, well, how did you get into recycling? Or, yeah, I could see how you think that's a really big issue. Like, please tell me more. So you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to say, I'm the biggest recycling nerd ever. But it is helpful to at least acknowledge that you're listening, you understand what they're saying, and you understand the value in what they're saying. It's also sometimes a good time to share a relatable anecdote. So if someone's talking about how passionate they are about recycling, maybe you have something in your history that might be about the environment or conservation that might be nice to share. So maybe you, did a community service project where you helped clean up a park. So maybe that's something that you might be able to connect to the other person with, which shows that you're interested in what they're saying, that you've thought about it enough to come up with your own experience that was similar, and that gives you something to kind of bond and talk over. So the V is for validate. So here's the key thing, I think, about validating in these situations. Validation is not the same as admitting someone's right. So I'm going to kind of use one of the more difficult things I think we currently run into, especially if you're, again, at a school mixer or meeting new students or anything of that nature where you're just trying to make acquaintances that might turn into friends later. Say you supported, Hillary in the election, and the person you're talking to supported Trump. And say Trump is important to everything you stand for, you're very passionate about that. But the student is going to be your partner in a project, and you have to get along with them for that reason. And it would just make your life easier if you guys could at least be acquaintances. So here's where it gets sort of tricky, right? So say the person is talking about an issue, again, that you feel strongly opposed to. So say the person is talking about how they very firmly believe a wall between the U.S. and Mexico is integral to policy, and they support Trump fully in his endeavors. If you were to argue with that person at that time, even if you're right, it doesn't really matter. You risk alienating the person, you risk making the situation more stressful, you risk having difficulties with your project, you risk alienating other people who might overhear or who might be friends of a friend, and you don't really gain anything because you're probably not going to change that person's opinion if it's that strong. So what you can do is validate without admitting objective correctness. So that would look something like, well, I can see you're really passionate about that issue. That's something that's really important to you. Like, why do you think that way? Or if you don't even want to get into that, you can just kind of say things like, I see how that could be related to your life and cause some serious changes, and I think it's great that you are passionate about politics. So it's kind of like a backhanded compliment almost. It's not complimenting directly the person or agreeing directly with their thing, but kind of finding ways around it. Another thing is kind of if you do want to add a slight disagreement with them, if you're like really passionate about this, you just can't let it go, because we all have that sometimes. I would definitely validate their argument first. So something like, that maybe you can find equal footing on. So yeah, I also think that immigration reform is really important. So you're validating them. And then if you want to add something in like, I have slightly different views on it, but I guess we can both agree that it should be a closely monitored issue. So that way they know you're not consenting exactly to what they're saying, but you haven't offended them, you haven't put moral judgments on it, and you've acknowledged that the issue is something that could be mutual footing for something that is important regardless of what side you're on. So the E, which is the last letter, stands for easy manner. So this is where I'm going to dive into social signaling a little bit. So as people, we have 5 main threat systems that are derived from a type of DBT called radically open DBT. That's a newer type of DBT based almost exclusively on social interactions. We don't need to get into the finer points of that, but if you're interested in looking into it, it's called radically open DBT. So, as humans, we have 5 kind of systems for social signaling. There's safety system, threat system, novel system, reward system, and overwhelm system. When you are in a setting where you're mixing with new people, and we're going to stick with talking to someone you have to work with who has different political views than you, there's probably a tendency to activate a threat system, which is kind of like fight or flight, or maybe an overwhelm system. But that doesn't usually yield friendships. So when you're talking to someone else who you need to be friendly with, acquaintances, or even a good friend, it's really important that you try to activate your social safety system. And this is kind of the cure for what's known as like resting bee face, or people who just look kind of angry all the time, even though they're not. This is a good way to fix that. And a lot of times people don't notice they're doing it. And sometimes you are aware you're doing it, and it's intentional, but if you do want to get along in a group of people or make new friends, it's definitely key to either activate the safety system and sometimes the novel system as well, which is just sort of excitement about new things. So, how do we do this? All right, the first thing I want to really highlight here is it's okay if it feels fake. Sometimes you'll find yourself faking it and then get so wrapped up in it that it ends up being a genuine safety feeling for you, and sometimes you won't. And that's okay. You shouldn't feel like that's disingenuous or manipulative, because what you're really just trying to do is signal to the other person that they are safe with you, even if you're not necessarily feeling safe. And I don't mean that in a literal, sense, life or death, but just in a comfortable is probably a good word for this. So it's letting the other person know they can feel comfortable, and to do that, you have to look comfortable even if you're not. Because we all have these things called mirror neurons. So if I were to make an expression that's kind of flat and disaffected and looks a little angry, the person is going to pick that up for me in only a few seconds. So if I were to talk to you about this, and instead of talking the way I am, I were to talk like this and not really move my eyebrows and just seem kind of disinterested, I'm saying the same things, but you're getting like a different read on it. Versus if I were to talk animatedly, like using my eyebrows and some half-smiling features, it's got like a totally different tone to it, even though I'm saying the same things. So some quick tricks to look as though you're safe and comfortable. Is first the sort of infamous in DBT, but it's half smile or closed mouth smile. And that's just kind of affecting a sort of like contentment, like half smile. There's some science to show that you could actually trick your brain into thinking you're happy if you smile for long enough. They're using Botox for that reason to treat depression now. So you don't really have anything to lose, even if it feels really awkward. And it probably will. And again, that's okay, because you fake it till you make it, or until the interaction's over. The other important thing is eye contact. You don't want to stare the other person down, but if you're not making any eye contact, it can make people feel like you're uncomfortable, or you don't really care, or maybe you're not that interested. So it's important to maintain some level of eye contact. The other thing is a relaxed body posture. So in RODBT, they have sort of a formula for making people feel comfortable, which is mostly, I guess, for sitting down, but it can be modified. And that's, you take a deep breath, so sigh, relax, kind of sit back, and affect the half smile. And it might seem forced and kind of silly, but when you do it, I find that I actually do end up kind of relaxing into the situation, and people around you tend to relax into that too. Versus if you're talking to someone and you're like this, and you're close, and you're looking down, even if you're interested in paying attention, it's not going to come across that way. Whereas if you sit back and kind of, smile and nod to what they're saying, you're sending them signals that you're friendly, you're approachable, and you're paying attention to them. So, again, we'll kind of do a quick run through to put this skill together, and it can be used in lots of different social situations. But if you are attending a school function or a get to know you or a new student thing where you have to meet a lot of people and they're people you're going to see every day, so even if you don't like them, even if you don't agree with them, you have to be friendly with them. I guess you don't have to, but it would make your life easier. You're going to approach them with gentle social signaling. So that's an open body posture, a half smile, eye contact, and deep breathing, relaxed vibe. You're going to make sure you're gentle with them. You're not attacking them. You're not judging them, even if you disagree with things they say. You're responding in ways that you can kind of stay true to yourself, but also not agree with them. So that was things like, oh, I can see why you feel that way, or you seem really passionate about that. There are a lot of things I'm really passionate about too. Then you're going to act interested, repeat things back to them in the forms of questions to try to know more. Someone talks about how interested they are in, Middle Eastern politics, and they're talking about that. Even if you disagree, asking something like, that's a really interesting point of view. How did you get to that? Or what factors contributed to your opinions? Again, that's not agreeing. That's just making conversation. And then validating, again, different than agreeing. So I see how you came to that conclusion. That issue seems really important to you. Yeah, I can definitely see why you're passionate about these things. I have a slightly different take, but we can both agree that they're important issues. And then easy manner, which is the social signaling I just talked about. And this is where the what, my, is mine skill that we talked about at the beginning also comes in, because it's important if you feel your body's chemistry kind of changing. So if you feel your ears turning red or your face getting flushed or you're tensing up, it's important to kind of repeat the deep breath, sit back, half smile, to kind of calm yourself down a little and catch things before they get escalated. So, thank you for tuning in. That was, again, the GIVE skill for making and keeping friends. Next video, we'll be talking about which interpersonal skills to use when your goal in the encounter is self-respect. Thank you. Bye.